Hey everybody, it's Tim with Broken Dice. Welcome back to the channel for another look at my solo wargaming projects. This is project number 2. Again, it's my archaic Greeks versus my early Archimedes Persians. 2,500 points, Clash of Empire rules, and we'll be just doing turn 1 today. Okay, let's take a look at the setup here. In the book, each army has a climate that they use, a climate type. For the Greeks, it's fertile. It's the only one they have. And the Persians have two, fertile and arid. I chose fertile because basically I have more terrain pieces for that, and I can divvy it out in a kind of an equal way. And I didn't want to have one of the armies be at a detriment because of terrain features. Let's talk about strategy ratings. Strategy ratings are those things in the book where they calculate in the historical aggressiveness of the army, the the technical advantages. It's just or organizational structure, just the sheer size of it, cultural kind of, oh gosh, what's the word I want to use? Basically, the way that culture wages war. At this point in time, you have to understand that these two armies, they represent this time period way before the Battle of Marathon. This is way before even the later Greek period, and especially different than what would be the Macedonians, okay, of later time period. So when you look at it and you say, well, why are the Persians lost? Well, the Persians were an empire for a very long time before they were subdued and by the Greeks. So, and especially at this point in time in history, the Greek city-states were not expansionist, not like the way the Persians were at this point in time. This is very early. They're very small city-states at this point in time. So this is a battle that we can assume would have been some early attempt of the Persians to invade Greece or some sort of Greek holding. Army ratings. Army ratings are your total force, which is 2,500 divided by 10. Now, what you do is you have that point, those points, and then what you get is your break point for your army when you're dealing with unacceptable casualties. In other words, in most of these games, you're not going to fight until everything on one side or the other is completely wiped out. Now, because the forces are evened up, all the numbers are the same. It's a breakpoint, 125 for one and 125 for the other. If you were playing some sort of historical scenario where you could have a disparaging, that's not the word I want to use. I don't know why I picked that word. A difference, let's say, in size of the army. Say one army has several hundred points more than the other, then their break point could be higher. It depends upon the costs of the units and that sort of thing. So it could come into play in a lot of different ways, and there'll be a lot of historical refights where that could be manipulated to make the game play much more historically accurately, where you actually get the outcome that you want, which mimics history. Or if history was so skewed, you could manage that breakpoint number to where the game is an actual game and is very enjoyable. So, with the Persians having the greater strategy rating, that means that their initiative within the game is higher. So what I've done is, with that, I've followed in the book where it says that the army with the greater initiative picks the scenario. So to be fair, I just picked pitched battle. But underneath there are some scenarios within pitched battle that the army with the higher initiative strategy rating, which equates into initiative, gets to pick the like a sub scenario within pitched battle. And so what I chose for the Persians was flank attack. Let's go over the armies. Here we have the Greek force. Their general, he has a heroic leader as a trait. +1 attack, -5 centimeters to command range, and must stay with the unit. And unlike a lot of other kind of games, your generals don't run around slaying forces left and right. They normally just make units better in this game. And so let's look at the regular troop types. So we got 4 units of citizen hoplites, 1 unit of levy hoplites, the difference being probably, I do believe it's their discipline level, and the fact that the levy hoplites have less armor. Then we have 1 unit of light cavalry and 2 units of skirmishers. The armies for the game for the Persians, armies for the game, but the army for the game for the Persians is led by Xerxes, traits King of Kings. With King of Kings, the allies may use their discipline and morale of the great king. That would come into play like if I had like some Greek allies, some mercenary troops, mercenary hoplites fighting with the Persian forces. -5 centimeters to range and +1 attack again for the heroic leader, and must stay with the unit. The army itself has 2 units of Persian cavalry, 2 units of Sparabara, 1 unit of Iranian archers, 1 unit of Iranian spearmen, 1 unit of guards infantry, and 1 unit of horse archers. Let's note here that 1 unit of the Persian cavalry and the guard infantry will be acting as a flanking force for the Persians. All right, so when it comes down to this strategy rating on a solo game, I was asking myself, how can I reflect that on the actual tabletop without having another player? So what I decided to do was, with the Persian side, was to roll a die 4 and add that number of cards to their what I would call the command initiative, or just your initiative cards for getting the first turn in the game. Again, trying to take as much of my own bias out of it. It would play differently if I was playing. It would be done differently if I was using going with against a human opponent. So obviously the Persians have won. They have a jack to the 10. And I think that's only fair because in the actual game against another opponent, again, like I said, it would be done a little bit differently. So I have to try to manufacture that disparity in the setup phase here. All right, with the setup all finished, let's begin with Persian phase of turn 1. All right, as you can see here, the Greek cards are dealt out and face up, and there are no cards here on the Persian phase. Apparently, in doing this, I have lost the photo of the order cards, the command order cards for the Persians. I've already moved them. You see all the markers. So let's just do a quick little review of what took place, because there's one or two interesting things that did happen in this quick movement phase, orders phase, let's say, of the Persian army. First off, on the top right, where the horse archers are, with the little red marker, that is their total march move. And since they march, that red marker behind them indicates that they cannot shoot, because that's a standard rule in the game that if you go your full, you go over your standard movement rate, then you can't shoot. That's a kind of familiar theme in a lot of games. The Iranian archers by the Sparabara, the two units of Sparabara, again, I don't know why I've got them just jammed up there together. That's visually incorrect, and it will be corrected in later turns. They're both going to stand. Now let's get my little laser printer here, my laser pointer. This unit here had a lower card than the Persian cavalry behind, with the attached Great King, King of Kings. Well, since they couldn't move through them, I was going to have this unit of Iranian spearmen do two simple moves, which I thought that's great. This is my first opportunity to explore the movement rules a little bit more in depth. And so what I chose to do was two simple moves, a march and a wheel. Well, for those Iranian spearmen to accomplish that, they needed to pass a discipline test, which they promptly failed on double sixes. Even with the Great King's leadership within range to influence them, they would have never passed. So they were down to doing just one simple move, of which I just wheeled them in the direction that I eventually want them to go anyway. I was hoping to get them far enough along to where I could move this unit up into the battle line and add their firepower along with the other two units. But that didn't happen. And so it's a very uneventful orders phase and movement phase. Oh, and one other thing, the flanking force. I need to get into this. The flanking force, for them to come on, and you can begin testing for them to come on at as early as turn 1 if you want to. And that I did. What they do is they take a discipline test off their leadership. Well, and this is something else I'm going to go back and cover, is I have two sub-commanders in this Persian army. And each one of them has a single trait. And each one of those traits is a little bit different. The one here with the Sparabara, he has that heroic leader. So he's with one of the units, and they'll get his +1 attack, but he has to remain with the unit. Now the other sub-commander, he has he has the disciplinarian, which he adds +1 to their DL. So he's normally an 8, and the +1 makes him a 9. So he actually has almost a general stat line, which is great. But he also promptly failed his discipline test to come in on the table. So the way this works is that if you fail that test, you go now on any subsequent test at a -1. So if he would have not had this disciplinarian trait, they gave him the extra +1. Now would we be testing on a 7 in subsequent turns for that unit to come on? But since he has been bumped up to a 9, now it's an 8 in subsequent turns. So it doesn't keep accumulating that if every time you fail it, it's even one worse. It doesn't. There's only one negative to it. But I thought that was an interesting turn for the Persian army here. That should have worked out in their benefit, because I rolled. I think it was a die 6 to see what trait they came up with, and these traits were rolled up randomly. And I think it was funny that he got the one trait that would really have paid off for them, but he still wound up failing his discipline test. So the best laid plans, I guess. Okay, here we see a long shot of the table. Gives you a little different perspective. You see the river here. Most of it is going to be treated like difficult terrain, except for the pieces between this rock and this tree. We're going to designate this area as a ford. The rest of it, like I said, is difficult terrain. I got this flank attack thing in, so the flanking units can either come down here, which this will be where this ford will play a part in the game, or all the way at the other end where that little green, the gray dot is. They're all along this table edges where they can come in at. So I have my options there. It's too bad that they failed. I would love to have seen them on the table already and start seeing some opportunities to really work in that, trying to get units into position, maneuvering, and that sort of thing. But we'll wait for next turn. So come to the end of the Persian phase of turn 1. Now we begin the Greek phase of turn 1. And excuse me, the cards are all dealt out. There's only one tactical problem that's arisen that you can see, is this jack right here would signify that this unit should go before the one in front of them. If this was a cavalry unit that could interpenetrate through those skirmishers, that would be okay. But since they wouldn't have enough movement because they are in a phalanx formation, I couldn't think of the word formation for one reason or another, they wouldn't have enough movement to get all the way through the unit of skirmishers, and therefore they can't make the move. So that's about the only tactical setback here. The rest of it, obviously with the ace up here, they'll be able to move out. These units will be able to move over here. The cavalry have nothing but this one little tree, and I'm not letting these trees count as significant terrain pieces at all. They're just kind of on the table for a little, to break up the flatness of the terrain. Over here we have the king and the queen. It's funny, the levy infantry, they've got the second highest card, so it doesn't really play out or mean anything. But here we go. Yeah, you can see where the Greek cavalry are. Movements. Obviously, everyone did their single move. I was hoping that these guys were going to be in range of the Iranians, so I didn't want to march. But they weren't, so no shooting there. But you can see where this phalanx here is held up. These two units have made their one standard movement rate forward. Over here, just off by the tree, you can see where the cavalry have advanced. Okay, here's another shot. Here's those units that are set up over here for, but that doesn't say that they have to come in this way. That's just where I've got them set on the table. Over here, you can see the Greek cavalry down at the bottom of your screen. They only made one movement rate. Some of their models were within range to shoot. They shot, and there was no damage. And that brings us to basically, this brings us to the end of turn 1. No casualties, a little movement, kind of what I expected. This was going to be more about the setup and what the game's going to be like. I was hoping there'd be a little bit more to talk about as far as movement goes, but it really didn't happen. Well, that's the end of this video. You guys have a great day. I will see you next time. Probably, I would think maybe 4 or 5 days, I'll throw up the next one. I got some terrain projects I'm working on. I got to get back to assembling some other stuff. I am really squirreling out this month, but I am doing just all kinds of hobby stuff. I hope everybody else is doing the best they can to enjoy this time. So I will see you next time. And everybody, please stay safe.